I'm honoured, Mr. Vice President, to be invited to come and join you. There are some of you I've met with, there are some who've corresponded with me, and I'm deeply sorry that so many more people are becoming leaseholders year after year, when we ought to have moved to a Commonhold system. We would no longer have to have the fight for the right to manage, no longer have to have the fight for the right to take on the freehold, and we would probably have got the property chamber and the leasehold valuation tribunals to have worked more fairly, more often, at far less cost. I'm going to call for a number of changes. The first change, which won't affect many, is to get rid of the archaic system of forfeiture, epitomised by the case of Dennis Jackson in Battersea, who took on a dispute with one of his fellow leaseholders with their managing agent and freeholder, won most things. She sadly died. He was hardly given the time off to go to her funeral, and it ended up with a zigzag between the Leasehold Valuation Tribunal and the County Court, and a flat valued at £800,000 in a dispute that was originally about £9,000, turned out to have costs of £90,000 when he believed what was said in the literature that the £500 fee would get you through the disputes over property. And it took the intervention of a number of us, including a senior director of the mortgage company, one of the major insurance companies in Britain, to get a stay of execution and get a judge to reverse a decision which should never have been made in the first place. Second, a lot of things that go wrong have the assistance or the involvement of professionals. In a case in my constituency, some elderly, frail, vulnerable leaseholders found themselves paying year after year for something they should not have to pay for. Lawyers and others managed again to do the ping-pong between the Leasehold Valuation Tribunal and the County Court to delay a simple hearing. Like many other leaseholders, they are indebted to the Leasehold Knowledge Partnership and Carlex for giving advice to me to nominate them to the Bar Pro Bono unit, and in 2 or 3 days, a good lawyer got all the objections to having the case heard dropped. I spoke to a senior partner of one of the professionals involved on the freeholder's side and said I was thinking of going to the Accountants Professional Standards unit. I then suggested that in a case which was fought out with full costs that might have yielded £140,000 repayment to my constituents, that if a settlement was offered without law, without costs of £70,000, I would advise them to accept it. That offer was made within 7 days, it was accepted, and they got some relief. But it shouldn't require LKP and Carlex and me and the Bar Pro Bono unit to get involved to have a simple dispute resolved. Then if we take the scandal of the overcharging by one of the major property companies, where complaints were made to the various law enforcement units, the Office of Fair Trading, the Serious Fraud Office and others, where if you start exchanging responsibility from one to the other, and if, for example, I'd been involved in the cartel and I was the dominant partner, suppose I had 95% of the market, and I was going to charge leaseholders for re-equipment they didn't need at prices they shouldn't have to pay in a competition that didn't exist. Why, if I got that 95% or greater share, if I shot myself after I know I've been reported to one of the law enforcement agencies, should I then get leniency as and when the Serious Fraud Office or the Office of Fair Trading eventually come to a conclusion? It's not just, it's not right, and if that's what the law is wrong. Then let's move on to the people who buy up freeholds. Suppose somebody buys a freehold for £300,000, writes it up in their accounts on valuation, so you've got a valuer involved, a professional, and auditors involved, professionals, and multiply the value by 3 or more, and then later, when I as the freeholder or I as the managing agent find myself defeated in a court, and a court establishes that the fair value is, say, 30% more than I'd paid some years on, so the valuation that's in the books, the valuation against which one of the major banks had lent a fortune, clearly doesn't have the asset behind it. I believe that we should be referring both the valuer and the auditor to their professional standards. How do they manage to do it? And if the answer is, which too often it is, that the managing agent and the freeholder have been taking on fees that are unjustified, that are agreed to be wrong, that makes it, in my view, even worse. When it was agreed with the Office of Fair Trading that exit fees could no longer be 1%, but should be £85, I believe that any other freeholder or managing agent who tries to enforce a 1%, even though it may have been in the original agreement, should again suffer exposure and invigilation and judgment by their own professional bodies. And I call on the media, through whose help we managed to make quite some advance, to try to have some experts who are willing to pick up the signs of unfair commercial activity, of illegal activity, and of plain abuse. I go further. I ask the property correspondents, the personal finance ones as well, to be involved. Because most of us know that if you didn't have unfairness in the leasehold market, and let's just reflect a moment on how big the leasehold market is. In London, I'm told over half the people are living in leasehold properties. And the growth of leasehold is going to grow as the number of flats grow. If there are 3 million people around the country who are involved as in leasehold properties, the numbers are probably as high as those affected by the issue I've got to go back and vote on shortly, on the spare room subsidy or whatever else people want to call it. But the amount of attention to the spare room subsidy has been enormous. The amount of attention to leaseholders has not been. And I pay tribute to your association and to my constituent Bobby Smitherman for all that you've done over the years to try to help get a balance of arms. I would say we're able to say to Tim Powell that if he's read the Property Chamber people have read the London Assembly Planning and Housing Committee on highly charged residential service, leasehold service charge in London, whether the balance of arms is thought to be fair, and whether people presiding at leasehold valuation tribunals will actually start saying, if there's an application to go to the county court, what increase in costs will this make, and is it necessary, or why can't the first level property chamber actually make the decision that they're set up to make at low cost, preferably without representation. And were I again talking to the people who kindly do serve on the leasehold valuation tribunals, at least those who have not resigned, could they kindly ask why they ever accept late submissions of papers on the day from the managing agent and the freeholder, when if the leaseholders make the slightest error at all, they're sent back to start again. And I would say I want to pay tribute to Anthony Eston and his team at least, because I've been to see the operation and they give good advice to many people. There are some things which I have doubts about, which is why government keeps them so short of money that they have to run commercial operations where some clever barrister gives advice to managing agents on how to tie leaseholders up in knots. And if I go through some of the cases where someone may have extended the time to get the right to manage by a year or a year and a half, because a right to manage company set up clearly with the purpose of being a right to manage company doesn't have RTO in its title, I will ask the barrister why he thought he could ever persuade a leasehold valuation tribunal or anybody else that that invalidated the application for the right to manage. These things are bluntly scandals. When I first got into Parliament, George Thomas, a Welsh MP, made his reputation by fighting for decades for the right to leasehold enfranchisement. You had the time when all those 99-year leases had been built in Wales and people were going to lose their homes. He eventually persuaded government and Parliament to change that. That was good. We need the same campaign now for the benefit of leaseholders. And don't take any words that might be interpreted as criticism, or even the ones intended to be criticism, as damning everybody involved. What I am saying is we need to be prepared to bring out into the open what's going on, so people can know, so people can make judgment, and people can make changes. And that includes government. I don't have confidence yet that the Department for Local Government and the Ministry for Justice have got a unit which works together, which can gather up the information they need to. I'm not convinced that the Property Chamber in its present or its previous form and the Serious Fraud Office and the Office of Fair Trading yet understand they've got to come together and provide a place where information can be gathered. And I don't believe that enough leaseholders go to their members of Parliament and ask them to be actively involved. I've seen cases involving leaseholders.
I wouldn't help.
Well, build on the ones who can. am concerned. This is supposed to be a disciplined meeting while I'm here. What you do with the others as you wish.
You'll know the dentist.
Well, there are cases in the Prime Minister's constituency, there are cases in the Chancellor's constituency, there are cases in the Defence Secretary's constituency, there are many of these. I want, without taking up too much of your time, to also say that openness tends to work. In one case, I said I was gathering information for a debate in Parliament, and it turned out that overnight, the person who was asking for an incredible amount as an exit fee changed their mind. How much nicer it would be if people didn't actually have to have the prospect of a debate in Parliament, just the openness, because a member of Parliament can't do anything else except be resourceful in using public information. Why people need that kind of invitation to rethink, instead of just saying, if the OFT have laid down that £85 is suitable, or at least just the actual cost of agreeing a transfer of a property or a sublet lease, why they ever go for more? I believe the Bar Standards Conduct Board should be looking at what some barristers do, not to say whether what they're doing is illegal, but asking whether it's serving as a friend of the court, which I've always understood the barrister's job to be, rather than using clever legal tricks for delay and for extra expense. People who buy leaseholds don't normally do it voluntarily, they do it because they haven't got a better alternative. And why they should be stuck in this legal quagmire for so long, so often, is beyond me. I predict there are going to be serious criminal charges brought against some people in this field. I predict there are some professionals who are going to find themselves losing their license or having to do a lot of explaining and apologising for the way they're abusing their position, whether it's in legal representation, or it's in valuations, or it's in audit and accountancy. And I hope that in time, I or someone else can come back to a meeting here and hear not that most people are doing good things most of the time, but that all people do things which are right because it's right, and they no longer try to follow the law saying something may be lawful, but it's clearly not what people ought to do. It requires publicity, it requires working together, and I'd like to pay a public tribute to those who've been active in this fight. I pay tribute to Lease and to their staff. I pay tribute to the association and what they do, to people like News on the Block and others who have their own website which are helpful. But nothing will be as good as trying to make sure that what the individuals in LKP and Carlex do, if that becomes part of the official system rather than unofficial system built on the goodwill of people who've got to know what's going on, haven't just worked for themselves, but are prepared to work for others as well. Now, having gone through the agenda I've gone through, I'm very sorry I didn't stick to one point. If I stuck to one point and made 3 demands, it would have been on Newsnight tonight, it would be discussed on the Today programme tomorrow. So we're going to have to start again at some stage and pick up issue by issue until people then start paying as much attention to this as they do to other scandals, which can be tackled if we work together. I think we've made a good start tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter has kindly said we have just a few minutes for some questions. So has anyone got a question?
Our friend there.
Thanks very much. My name's Julian Shersby. Just had to pick up one of the points you made, Peter, on the issue of lease, because I had a case almost as serious as Dennis Jackson down in Dorking in Surrey, which cost me about £44,000 in LDT cost decision against me after an LDT hearing Man's Chamber of Back. And both I and Dennis Jackson feel very strongly that lease was actually the body that got us into our predicament, because both I and Dennis I've discussed it with feel that lease encouraged us to go to the LVT, leading us to believe it was a low-cost, affordable body where costs were limited to £500. And even after the initial decision against me, lease still encouraged me to go to another LVT hearing to contest the costs. And although it's very nice to think lease are wonderful, lovely people here to help us all, they really have their own agenda, which is to keep their own staff complement as big as they would like, as it currently is. And they almost need the disputes in order to...
No, well, okay. Thanks, Julian. Okay.
The secondary point is with the help of MPs.
Yeah.
My MP, Sir Paul Beresford, actively refused and avoided helping me at every turn. I copied him into correspondence when I was facing and he cancelled surgery appointments on me.
Sorry, can we finish the question there?
Okay. Can I ask you to subside, and I'll just say a word or two?
Well, I think
I can't.
On lease is very serious.
Please sit and listen.
I can't speak until you're sitting down,
Okay.
please. And you might give the microphone back as well, just in case you start talking again.
Sure.
First of all, although it's not my job to defend lease, if lease say the fee for the LVT is £500, that's accurate. What's not accurate, and what they haven't said, is the costs are limited to £500. Now, perhaps they ought to be clearer, and certainly government websites should make absolutely plain that here are some illustrative ranges of costs that people have been left with when they've won and when they've lost. So I think I'd prefer to put the responsibility more on government, although I know that lease will be listening to what you're saying. I don't make comments on other members of Parliament. I happen to be, this is what my wife calls the MLM bit, the me lovely me bit, slightly more resourceful than many. And when I was intervening with the knowledge of the local member of Parliament in the Jackson case, she said to me afterwards, I didn't know an MP could do that. All I'd done was to ask someone to come and have a chat.
Well, mine could have, but he actively avoided
but we've heard you once, so please let me just go on.
Well,
I'm going to stop you if I may, please, Julian, please.
It's a wider issue.
Indeed. But it did remind me of cases in Plymouth where a freeholder controls the managing agents and pretends they're not dissociated, but not really the same decision makers. I make this demand that every managing agent that has any link with the freeholder puts it in bold on their documents to the leaseholders, so it's known. And secondly, they declare all the insurance commissions or paybacks they get, so it's known as well. This knowledge business is what's needed over and over again. Can we move on to the next question?
Yes. Could we?
How would you treat the freeholder that came to the tribunal, head of insurance, and told us right in our face that they're trying to do the best they can to get competitive insurance quotes when they're actually getting 15% out of commission, and the commission they got in 1 year alone was more than £15,000, and so on. And they were sitting there saying that they've got no interest in making it an elevated insurance, because this is an absolute disgrace of a system where I stand, and I was there alone defending 275 flats with no legal knowledge whatsoever.
Okay, well, I admire you for taking it on. I think what I would try to suggest to the property chamber is that in any issue that might bring that up, there's an inquiry that goes to the managing agent of the freeholder to declare any connection between the managing agent and the freeholder and any insurance commissions, paybacks or other ways of enhancing their income. And I think if that's a straightforward inquiry that goes out automatically, it doesn't require someone like you to have to ask it, it'll be on the face there now. We know that there's a judicial inquiry, or Judicial Conduct Office, into Benjamin Mire. We know that there's a whole list of actions where he was involved in front of the Leasehold Valuation Tribunal, where the tribunal found against him over and over again, some of them involving this insurance premium business. I call for that report, which when he saw it he resigned, to be made public. It would have been made public if he'd refused to resign and been disciplined. It should be made public even though he's read it himself and decided to go. I don't see any difference for the public interest in knowing what it was that caused him to decide in the public interest or his own interest to go.
Did you resign?
He did resign. I've asked for the report. I've been told that because he's resigned it's not supposed to be available. I think that's a decision which I hope will change.
Right. I think we have a... Can we have one?
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Raina Kev, Boardroom Magazine days, I used to know you. And I've run into a similar situation. I've just done a film on this little thing with Marcus Shields and Dennis Jackson's case. One's involving my blog. I wondered, do you think it would help everybody in this room if we were able to work with the open data factor that's within government and all the rest of it, with chimney burners? There's a big conference on it recently, to get as much of this information as we can online, so we can sort of name and shame? Is there a way that we could come see you and talk to you about getting it done?
Well, I think you'll talk among yourselves and then talk with me, because I'm not just doing this, I'm trying to do whistleblowers in the NHS, I'm trying to do 3 other major things at the same time.
Okay.
Partly because I make the mistake of being an activist. I'm not one of the few, I'm one of the many. But I think that certainly being open matters. And I think that I've always tried to, I haven't always succeeded, run my public position. What would I feel if what I'm doing appeared in my local newspaper? And if I'd be embarrassed, I should either tell the local newspaper I'm doing it or not do it. And I think that openness is what really matters. But I also believe that if, again, I'm not attacking the property chamber, but if they had a way of gathering in the various ways that the stratagems used by lawyers or by managing agents or freeholders adversely and improperly and unnecessarily, if that guidance went out to people on these tribunals and property chambers, I think you'd find many more of their presidents being firmer earlier and dismissing applications which were unnecessary. I think we can just get a general sense of what's right and wrong and what's proper, and I think it'll work.
Thank you very much.
I've finished. I think you need to get on with the rest of it, and I need to go back and vote for us.
Thank you very much indeed.
I won't see an MP much longer if I define my whips unnecessarily. Thank you.
Well, I think we can thank